Hello dear friends, I hope that you're all well and that you are having a lovely weekend. My name is Colleen, for those of that you have met me before, and I've got this challenge sometimes I feel challenged. I've got this channel where I like to do crafts. I specialize in doing things like junk journal, quite a bit of decoupage, and a few other bits and bobs along the side. I have taught crafts for many years, and so it's just a real joy to be able to share my knowledge with you as I go on my journey. I've got a kind of a what if brain. What if I do this? What if I do that? So that's where I come from. So today's project is going to be using your acrylic stamps on fabrics of different colors, and I want to just show you how to go about that, because you can get some really stunning results, or you could flop quite horribly. So the first thing that we're going to need is some gesso. You'll need either a palette knife or a store card to be able to spread the gesso. I find a little spritz bottle with water to be quite useful. And then I've got two different color fabrics. This lovely floral one, which has got quite intense colors, and then I've also got these lovely, this lovely blue fabric, which as you can see has faded because I work outside a lot and the sun has just played havoc with that. So I'm going to play with these two, and I'm going to start off with the blue. And when we put the white on it, it's actually going to create quite a nice background for stamps, but I do want to be able to see the fabric showing through. So you'll see that the gesso itself is actually quite nice and thick and goopy, and I don't want it to be as goopy as that. So I'm just going to spritz some water onto this as I work. I'm going to hold my hand securely on one side and work from the middle outwards and try and get it as evenly as possible. You can even rotate the fabric if you need to do so, and as necessary just give it a little bit more water. This will help you to apply the gesso to the fabric, and it will also make it slightly more transparent and a little less goopy. So to begin with, it's going to look as though it's a hot mess because it's going to have some very thick marks, but I'll show you how to correct that in a moment. So just working from the center outwards. Fabric is going to stretch and pull, and it's quite difficult with this technique to really get it taped down on a board unless you use something like a stencil glue, or as it's known in some countries as table tack. That would hold your fabric pretty solidly. So just get it onto the fabric first. Make sure you go all the way to the ends like that, and then I will come in with my store card. I'm just going to spritz a bit of water onto this so that as I hold it at an angle it runs down, and I'm going to just drag my store card across. This is a bit like a squeegee that you use in screen printing. Squeegee being just like a more rigid window washing kind of tool, and I'm just scraping off any excess gesso that I have. It's a bit floppy, so that is a challenge in itself, but I do want to get a nice smooth finish. And as the fabric sort of wrinkles and curls, you might find that you pick up these little threads. Try and remove those so that they don't actually become part of your design, unless sometimes you see, that looks pretty cool, I'm going to leave that. So I'm going to get that evenly on. It's thicker in some parts than in others, but I'm not unhappy with that. But what I can see is the fabric showing through. So this is what you would do in collage, is just building up nice layers of textures and colors, just getting everything in position. So this is the first step. So let's put that one aside. I'm now going to work using the same technique but on a piece of this colored fabric. So again, I'm going to just use my palette knife to get this on, starting from the center and dragging it towards the sides. And for this sort of florally one, I thought of doing some tags and ephemera and a centerpiece for a garden journal that I'm busy with, so that will lend itself nicely. So remember this stage, just get it on, cover to the ends, rotate the fabric, turn it around as necessary. Sorry, I should have secured my messy piece of card here. And then I'm just going to use my store card with a little bit of water on, just to even this out. Scrape off any excess that you pick up, because you obviously don't want to be spreading that back onto your fabric. And this is a lovely way to use up that piece of fabric that you either love and don't want to part with, as I've done with my blue, or if you've got other pieces of fabric that you don't like so much, cover them up with some of this and then stamp on them. So the next step now is to leave this to dry completely, and I'll show you what it looks like once it's dry, and then we'll begin our stamping. Sorry, my video cut out there, so I'm just testing the stamp on the paper to make sure it's got sufficient ink, and that it has. So now I'm going to ink it up once again. Just again making sure that it's really well covered. And I'm going to place this onto my fabric, down the bottom I think. Press down, leave it for a couple of seconds just to penetrate into the fabric. You do need to put a fair amount of pressure on this just to make sure that the ink is coming in contact with the fabric. Alright, grab a little edge and lift it up. Another lovely print, very happy with that. Alright, so we've got a third one in this series to do, and this is a little owl. Now you could go on and decorate each one of these little pieces of ephemera that I'm making with a lot of things like labels, and you could put stickers on. You could even use some of your inks to color them. But for today's purposes, I'm going to keep this pretty simple, because today's tutorial is not about embellishing them, it's about showing you how to stamp. So I'm happy with that print, so now I'm going to go straight onto my fabric. And this is a rectangular shape, so I'm going to position this down like that. Press firmly. And lift. Those have come out beautifully. Now the second lot of stamps I'm using are more delicate and have finer lines, so I'm not expecting to have really crisp lines 100%, because if you look at these compared to these ones, you'll see that these have slightly deeper recesses and these are quite shallow. I just want to see what is going to happen. So what I'm doing is that I'm positioning them face downwards on this tag, and now I'm going to come in with my stamping block to pick them up like that, and then I'll ink them both. But this means that I'm not having to do two stamps. I'm just doing them together so that they're in the right places. And we're going to pop them here and press down firmly, and lift. So you'll see here where there's quite a lot of detail in the middle, the ink wasn't quite as strong, but I'm not worried about that, because I will be adding to these things if I'm going to use them in a journal. So let's move on with the next one, and I'll just speed the next section up. Okay, so quite a nice little Art Deco image. This stamp was a little bit more difficult to see because it is quite an old stamp, so it started to go yellow in the background. I couldn't see the inking as well, but I'm happy with that print. This little one, very sort of soft image, but that's also okay. But the others have all come up pretty crisply. So I think you'll agree that we've been able to get some very nice little prints out of the stamps that we've done on the fabric, with the lovely colors showing behind. I'm going to develop these just a little bit more. I'm going to make these tags into proper tags, do a bit of inking around the edges, and I'll show you what they look like as a finished product. Okie doke, so let me show you what I've done. I've taken my distress ink in the vintage photo, and I've inked around the edges and used my little blending sponge just to bring a bit of color over that fabric so it doesn't look quite as new. And then I've just used some pencil crayons just to lightly bring in a bit of the green, and here I've colored in the branches and this tree trunk of those. With the watery ones, I used some eye zinc dye, so this is not a waterproof ink. You have to be careful if you're going to use it with other things, but again I went around the edges, inking up the edges. I'll just show you quickly how I do that. I just use the side of the ink pad to ink that, and then I use the little blending sponge just to soften the fabric and bring in a little bit of the color valley that I'm using. And then I found this lovely chiffon ribbon, which I cut in half, and then I've used that on my little tags here, so that gives quite a nice sort of soft floaty feel, which replicates the little jellyfish, its little tentacles, and that too very watery feel. And so I'm very happy with how those have turned out, and I hope that you are encouraged now to maybe try this on some scraps of fabric and see how you go. Thank you for joining me. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and yeah, give me any comments and feedback in the description below. Bye for now.